Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS fades and sleepers for this week's Honda Classic, an old-time staple of the channel, a video series we used to do every single week. But with football coming around, I didn't have quite as much time, so it got cut out. But glad to bring it back. It was a series that I think a lot of you enjoyed. Came out a little bit later in the week as ownership, right, takes a little bit of time to mature, but still, though it doesn't have the longest shelf life, I think it could be maybe the most important, maybe the most insightful piece of content that I'm putting out every single week. And here in this video, I'm going to cover my two fades of the week, two players that I think are way too highly owned to be used in your DFS lineups. And I'll give you a few reasons why you might want to avoid them, or at least consider it, right? You can still play them, but I'll give you a few things to watch out for. And then on the other side of that spectrum are sleeper picks, players that are being well lower owned than they should be, guys that are quote unquote ownership pivots that you could get to and using those large field GPPs to get that much needed leverage to the field. So looking forward to it. Again, this is one of my favorite videos, one of my favorite series that we did here on the channel. I'm so glad to bring it back. Let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. Alrighty, we've got our projections up and we're gonna keep it a little bit quicker this time. I gotta get out on the golf course, going to the Pro-Am today to do a little bit of scouting out there. So make sure you stop on by for the stream tonight. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be giving you all the goods, but our first fade, we'll start with the fades, right? We'll start with the bad news before we get into the sleeper picks. Is Sungjae, your top priced player. He's 10 to 1 to win. He started at 7.5 to 1, ended up going up to 8, 8.5, and then jumped the whole way up to 10 to 1. And anytime a player's 30% owned, that's pretty much auto fade range, but particularly when it's at the Honda Classic, perhaps the most volatile event we have all year. And though Sungjae is one of the best plays when it comes to modeling, is a past winner at this event, he's not worthy of being 30% owned. Nobody is. I mean, honestly, when you start to get to that 20% range, that's pretty much an auto fade at the Honda. In my 30% ownership projection is actually a little bit conservative compared to a few other voices and a few other sites around the industry that have him closer to like 40% ownership. So $10,700, he could still finish in the top 5 and get to that optimal. But when you're telling me that I can box out a third of the field, sometimes even more in those single entries, those higher dollar single entries especially, where a lot of people are just going to jam in Sungjae for a little bit of I suppose it's opportunity cost, right? They feel like they're going to be missing out. There's the FOMO there as well. That's the kind of stuff you want to avoid in GBPs. So it's straightforward, right? I'm not going to play 60% Sungjae this week in my lineups. A few things to note, the recent form, particularly last week, he was in 11th after the first 2 rounds and then ended up finishing in 56. So towards the bottom 10 of the players that made the cut at the Genesis. Before that, right, did have the top 6 finish, the top 4 finish at the Farmers and WM. That's why he was so chalky at the Genesis. I think that's why, his ownership numbers are where they are this week. But you have to remember, he missed the cut here last year. And outside of the win, it's not like he's been invincible, right? T8, that might not be enough at 10,700. T51 back there in 2019. So it's not like he has this track record of finishing top 5 every single year at the Honda. Just an easy fade. I don't care if he's hitting the ball like Christ himself out there. You can see he's gaining across the board with the shots gained metrics, but it's not like he's gaining like John Rahm. So I understand the form. He was one of my favorite plays. If he would have been 15, maybe 20% owned, I would consider playing him there. But even when my conservative projection has him at right around 30% ownership, just not somebody I can really get to. Next up, our last fade, we'll get into the sleepers next, is going to be Lee Hodges at $7,700. And last week, I was perhaps the Hodges whisperer, right? One of our value picks, somebody that I had a ton of leverage to the field on, and a lot of you in the community did as well. So it was great to see. But now he's the chalk at the top of the 7K range. And while he's not the highest owned player here, that's reserved for Ben Griffin. Guys like Aaron Rye, Steven Yeager are getting quite a bit of attention too. He's still much higher owned than most of his peers. Like, he's twice as owned as a Justin Suh. He's 1.5 times as owned as somebody like a Byung-Hun Un. You have, Robbie Shelln, who's significantly lower owned. Garrick Higo is like 4 times less owned than a Lee Hodges. So while he's not by and afar the highest owned guy in this range, I mean, let's remember, he was $6,100 the week before. He had missed 5 straight cuts coming into that event, and now he's got a massive price increase and a massive ownership increase. He's nearly 20 times the ownership that he was there at the Genesis. So for me, I think you're chasing if you're going after Lee Hodges. And the ball striking stats last week were not favorable. So if you look at the last 24 measured rounds, you can see he's actually just a slight gainer on approach now, losing around the green. That's kind of always the case. And the putter was a huge asset for him, but it's typically not his best category. He's typically one of the worst putters on tour. So for him to have gone out there, gained the way that he did there at the Genesis, I just think that's completely unsustainable. So at $7,700, probably the easiest fade here of the week. Let's look at the event history. It's actually, I don't know his event history. I'm pretty sure he played here last year, made the cut. Yeah, he finished top 10 last year. So that's the one thing I have to say is that his event history and his small sample size is great. But I mean, look at this, right? Robbie Shelton, T11, that missed the cut, right? Benny Ann even, right? His top end finishes, missed the cut. Hayden Buckley, right? You would think that he'd be a good course fit here because of how accurate he is off the tee. Another relatively chalky player, right? Made the cut, missed cut. Let's see. Bramlett missed the cut every time he plays here. And that's another thing. Joseph Bramlett, another really chalky player. So, if he's going to be like 16% owned and he's missed the cut in both tries, maybe that's somebody you might want to consider fading, right? But look at this, right? Cut, T4, right? Top 17, and then hardly even gets through the cut line right there, tied for 70th. It's extremely volatile. So though he does have that top end finish, I think that's maybe what's driving this ownership up the way that it is. It's just not worth it, right? The guy was $6,100. He's missed 5 out of his 6 last cuts. That's just a tough scene, something that I'm not willing to look past, and why I'm avoiding him in GPPs. On the other side of things, players that are sleepers are guys that are way lower owned than they should be. And there's one extremely low-owned player here in this 8K range, and it's Garrett Higgo. And it's because he's overpriced, right? He has the 8 next to his name. There's a lot of psychology involved with that. If he was $7,900, he might be twice as owned as he is there at $8,000. So it's kind of like the price tag at the gas station, right? Where they're putting that 9/10 at the end to try and trick you. More often than not, they're going to put it at like 49 cents if they can, or like 39 cents, and then the 9/10. Just to go out there and really try and tax you. And with Garrett Higgo, that's kind of the effect you're getting. Last year, through 2 rounds, he was in contention at this event. He didn't end up finishing all that great. You can see he finished tied for 66. He blew up there on Saturday, but he's a proven winner. Like, every year we get that one random guy that pops at the Honda. It could very well be Higgo, because in terms of talent level, he's on par with everyone in this range. He's just so much more inconsistent. I mean, if you look at the recent form, you'll get an idea for, kind of what I'm talking about here. So missed cut, top 20, right? 53rd, nearly a top 10 finish, right? That's kind of his MO. When he's on his game, he's typically going to get into contention. And when he doesn't have his game, he's either missing the cut or blowing up over the weekend. And in a large field GPP, that's what you're looking for. And in this large field that's relatively shit, right? It's large, but it's, low quality across the board. You want the guys that can actually go out there and pop. And unlike a lot of the other players here in the top of the 7K range, Higgo could easily win this event. I mean, he won his first ever tour event on the PGA Tour, right? Enough said. He has, 5 wins internationally at this point. I know hasn't been in the best form, but when he came, he snaps out of form out of nowhere, right? This recent finish where he finished 11th, 20th was after missing 7 of 10 cuts or something like that. I mean, he was just absolute dog shit for quite some time. So $8,000, 4.9%, you're not going to feel great about it, right? You're not going to feel great about spending in the 8K range for Garrett Higgo, but I think he's got some upside. You can see he's better on Bermuda than he is on pretty much any other surface, about 2/3 of a stroke better. Again, those first 2 rounds last year were an absolute masterclass from him. And the shots gained metrics are a little bit better than you'd expect, right? Gaining off the tee, that's kind of his MO. He's one of the better drivers on tour, actually. Gaining on approach, that's kind of the huge X factor for him. And around the green and putting is never going to be his specialty. But like I said, on Bermuda, he's at least right around a neutral. So if he goes out there, he putts to a neutral, he leans into that ball striking ability, that off the tee and approach that he's had of late, he could literally win this event. I'll just say that. I'm not going to bet him outright. Maybe after the first round, if he shows me a little bit of form, maybe I add him live, that sort of thing. But in DFS, I think he's an excellent play regardless, because he doesn't have to win, right? A top 10 would be enough. And you saw, right, the 11th place. What event was that at? The 11th was at the Amex, I'm pretty sure. A much stronger field than what you have here. And then you had the top 20 at Pebble, which again is twice the field that you had here, right? Tom Hoge would be one of the favorites at this event, and he was the 8th or 9th best guy in that field. Lastly, our last sleeper is Davis Riley, $7,400. I am a sucker for him. I talk him up, I feel like, every time he plays. And a lot of times it doesn't work out, but it's worked out enough to where it's paid me off long term. And you can see the recent form has been volatile, right? A lot of missed cuts mixed in. In fact, he's missed his last 3 cuts. He had a tied for 65th there. But before that, during the fall swing, right, a few top 10s. Last year especially, he flashed that upside. And you can definitely say that he started this year with a little bit of a sophomore slump. You're going to see that from a lot of the guys that were good last year. Let's say the one guy that's kind of shook that off seems to be Sahith Theegala. That's kind of why I'm so high on his long-term upside. And we've seen Sahith like 4 years, right? He played the Genesis when he was like 16, 17 years old. So we've kind of known that about him for a while. But Davis Riley, right, he's gone into that sophomore slump, but now we get him at $7,400. Relatively low ownership, right? 9.4% isn't like drastically low. It's not 4.9% like a Garrick Higo. But when you compare him to like the Bramlets, who are like 16%, Nick Hardy, who's going to be 14% plus, Buckley, who's going to be chalky. I mean, even Benny N, who I like this week, right, is going to be higher owned than a Davis Riley. This is the spot to buy in, right? Like, even if you're a Davis Riley hater, right? There's guys out there that give me shit for talking him up every time, going, Luke, Davis Riley again, come on, like, what are you doing here, right? Even those sort of people this week have got to see the upside, right? He's low owned, now he's low priced, and we've seen it before at difficult Florida tracks, right? Think of the Valspar last year. I mean, this event, I don't think he had the best showing last year, but again, at the Valspar, he nearly won. He tied 42nd last year. At least he made the cut at this event. Players Championship, I don't think he got in last year, but we'll see him this time around. We'll get to see if this was just a one-year fluke, right? The Valspar, then how he performed here, or whether it might be a trend of things to come. So $7,400. I'm kind of just a sucker for that guy, but I mean, the shots gain metrics back it up. He's one of the best approach players in this field, gaining over half a stroke per round. Podging Harrington, right, gaining 0.6, but that's over there on the European Tour. In terms of just pure PGA Tour stats, he's been extremely impressive. Off the tee, he gets into a lot of trouble with his accuracy, but he's not going to have to hit driver around this track, which might seem to kind of hold him back there as he hits it so long. But if he's not going to be hitting water balls because he's hitting driving iron off the tee, that might help him out, right? Just lean into the approach play. You can gain 5-6 strokes on approach Davis, lean into that. And then on Bermuda, it's his best surface. You can see he's actually a gainer on Bermuda. Over the recent stretch, he's been losing about a third of a stroke per round. He gains a third of a stroke per round on Bermuda grass. So if he can turn the putting around, which you'd kind of expect going back to his home surface, can lean into the iron play. I think he's got a solid floor here, which is kind of what you want, right, for DFS at the Honda Classic. But then we know the upside, right? We've seen it multiple times over his first season and a half. And I think it's well worth a few looks in large field GPPs. All right, fellas, that is all I've got for the fades and sleepers. Was glad to bring it back. I felt like, had the extra time. Might as well go out there and talk about some ownership. So go ahead, comment down below who you're fading this week. One player priced $8,000 and above that you won't have in any lineups. And don't make it like Garrick Higo, right? Make it somebody that's actually garnering some steam and give us a reason why. Or go ahead and let me know your number one sleeper pick, right? So if you don't want to go through a fade, sometimes that's a little difficult. I get it. Making these videos, I have to really consider who to fade, right? That's the hardest part of DFS, right? Is figuring out who not to play. If you want to give me a sleeper, you can go ahead and do that too. Just make sure they're priced $8,000 and below and relatively low owned too. But like I said, guys, I appreciate it. Best of luck with all of your lineups this week. Go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well, so you don't miss any of the content in the future. I'll be going live tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, covering what I see at the Pro-Am, which as soon as I get this uploaded, I'll be driving up there to Palm Beach Gardens, getting the scouting report on the course, getting ready for the tournament this weekend, and relaying all the info back to you later. So looking forward to that. There's also going to be a link in the description to that, so make sure to check it out if you're looking to set a reminder, right? Make sure you don't miss that there at 7 p.m. But like I said, looking forward to it. I'll see you guys at the stream, and let's go ahead and make some money this weekend.